Okay, so let's talk about Family Guy Season 20, Episode 4. Sometimes I watch these episodes and I wonder if the writers are just messing with us. Like, is there a secret competition going on where they try to out-weird each other? Because this one feels like it. It opens with that classic, almost aggressively cheerful song about values and, well, the Family Guy himself. It's like they're setting up this whole wholesome facade, right? And then, bam, tumbling class. And immediately, the dads are grumbling about the cost. $24 for a mat in a room? I mean, yeah, that's a bit steep, but compared to what Stewie and Doug are about to get into, it's practically free. Stewie's little somersault is, well, it's a somersault. And then Doug shows up. Doug, the rival baby. Suddenly, this little infant class is like a miniature WWE event. Doug just waltzes in, nails a somersault like he was born doing them, and the moms are cheering. Stewie's not having it, though. He's like, give him my shirt and overalls, he's my son now. That's peak Stewie. He's already plotting how to reclaim his dominance. Meanwhile, Chris is asking Peter about girls, which is always a recipe for disaster. And Peter, instead of giving actual advice, just hands him a stack of ancient VHS tapes. VHS! That's like asking a caveman for dating tips. He's telling Chris to watch 16 Candles and Can't Buy Me Love and do what the 28-year-old teenagers do. Dude, that was like ancient history. The fact that Chris even knows what VHS stands for is impressive. And this whole Tenet interlude is just a hilarious nod to how confusing that movie was. Seriously, who understood that? Anyway, the show and tell segment is where things really get wild. Stewie brings out a seashell that looks like, well, you know. And Peter's immediately like, where's my she-shell? Lois is mortified, but Peter's just happy Stewie's keeping his traditions alive. Doug, of course, has to one-up him again. A ticket stub from a PG movie he saw alone in the theater. And a Disney cruise. And then he shows a picture with Moana, and the kids freak out because Moana is famously agoraphobic. The explanation? CBD oil, because of course. It's the kind of modern, slightly absurd twist that this show excels at. Then Doug pulls out the ultimate trump card, a Lion Bar from the London airport. British candy for the whole class. That's just cruel, Doug. Absolutely cruel. Stewie's not about to let that slide, though. He's furious. He's sick of being one-upped. And then we get that amazing scream about haircuts. What even is that? Babies think haircuts are that traumatic? It's terrifyingly specific. And then Joe's there, asking about Jennifer smeared across Highway 9. Just another Tuesday in Quahog, I guess. Peter's science project to make a sex slave from a magazine photo? Yeah, that's a choice. Lois is understandably horrified, and Peter's defense is basically, it's the 80s. And that's the whole problem, isn't it? Peter's obsession with the 80s is getting out of hand. Lois finally snaps and banishes him to the outside Peter house. I love that there's a literal outside Peter house, complete with thunder. And then we see Doug, the golden child, playing with kindergartners. Stewie's seeing red. He's desperate to one-up Doug. Flipping his eyelids inside out? Carving himself? Those are some dark ideas, Stewie. And then he suggests doing Doug's mom. Stewie, no. That's where we draw the line. Meanwhile, the Frisbee is stuck way up high. The jungle gym looks like it's about to collapse. It's basically the most dangerous playground in the history of the world. And Stewie, in his bid to prove himself, volunteers to climb it. He's going to climb the most dangerous jungle gym ever built to get a Frisbee. And his backup plan? Ask Spider-Man, who he knows, and who apparently came to his birthday party, and it was just his dad in a suit. The hernia detail? Perfect. It's the little things. Stewie's prepping for his climb, thinking about legacy, comparing himself to historical figures. He's really taking this Frisbee retrieval seriously. He wants to be remembered, like 9/11 was for a few years. Oof, that's a dark punchline, but also kind of brilliant in its shock value. And the guy who was hanged next to Nathan Hale is just peak Family Guy dark humor. All this while Peter is trying to get Lois into a three-way with a seashell. Smooth, Peter. Real smooth. Lois is done with his 80s nonsense. She calls him out on how tired and dangerous his nostalgia is. And Peter's response? He doubles down. He's going to prove the 80s are still relevant by drilling a hole in the wall to watch girls shower. That's not great, Peter. Not great at all. And of course, he has all the drill bits. He's really committed to his problematic 80s vision. The gopher incident is just sad. A poor gopher just trying to exist. And Peter accidentally kills it with his harmless 80s fun. Lois is absolutely right. This has to stop.
Kenny Loggins showing up to say he still loves 80s references and gets hot tubs for it is such a meta gag. It's exactly the kind of thing this show does. The race up the jungle gym between Stewie and Doug is intense. 15 zippers? Doug is really showing off. And then Stewie says he cares most about the red-haired girl from Charlie Brown's opinion. Oh, Stewie, you softy. And then the girl reveals she just wanted his ballerina skirt. Ouch. The climb is brutal. Dried Booger Ridge. Seriously? The names they come up with. Stewie gets the frisbee, and then Doug falls. It's dramatic. Stewie's trying to help, but Doug's voice is fading. And then his friends chiming in, complaining about the distance. They're so close, but they're also miles apart emotionally. Stewie's stuck. He radios base camp on his Elmo phone. Of course he has an Elmo phone. And Elmo is just Elmo. He's not helpful, but he's adorable. Then the storm hits. The jungle gym is literally falling apart. And who else shows up? The homeless people who live and copulate in the playground. Because why not? It's Quahog. Peter's moved on. He's in the 1920s now for the legal cocaine. He's designing a stupid flying contraption. Of course he is. And then he switches again, this time to the 1910s, for silent movies. Lois is at her breaking point. She tells him to just be a normal human. And Peter, in his typical fashion, completely misunderstands. He thinks she's saying the 80s were the best and he needs to accept it. He needs to be alone. The final confrontation on the jungle gym is chaotic. Stewie's trying to save Doug, the wind is howling, the jungle gym is groaning, it's a disaster. And it all comes down to a desperate plea and a really, really stuck foot. The storm is raging, and Stewie is trapped with Doug and the playground homeless population. Meanwhile, Peter's still on his decade-hopping kick, designing planes and then suddenly in black and white for silent movies. Lois's exasperation is palpable. She's just had enough. She wants him to be normal, to be a husband, a father. Peter's response? A complete misunderstanding of her plea. He thinks she's saying the 80s are unbeatable, and he needs to accept that. He retreats to his alone place, whatever that means. The climax on the jungle gym feels like classic Family Guy chaos. The danger is real, but it's framed by the show's signature absurdity. Doug's predicament, Stewie's desperate attempts to help, the storm, the homeless people, it's a lot. And Peter's decade hopping is just pure Peter. He's incapable of learning a lesson unless it's directly forced upon him, and even then, he often twists it into something worse. The ending with Stewie still stuck and Peter off on another tangent feels anticlimactic, but that's also kind of the point. This show rarely has neat resolutions. It's more about the journey through the madness. The whole episode feels like a commentary on nostalgia, on how we cling to certain eras, and how that can be both comforting and incredibly problematic. It's a balancing act the show always tries to pull off, and this episode leans heavily into the problematic side. It's a wild ride, and it definitely makes you think about how we consume culture and how we remember the past. And just when you think it's over, there's that final scene, with Peter and some new ridiculous getup, completely oblivious. It's the perfect Family Guy ending. Now, if you like these deep dives into cartoon chaos and want more of this kind of analysis, you should totally subscribe. It's how we keep the lights on and the sarcastic commentary flowing. You know, if you're not subscribed, you're basically missing out on all the fun we're having dissecting these shows. Don't be that person. This episode, Season 20, Episode 4, starts with a seemingly innocent tumbling class. But like most things in Quahog, it quickly devolves into a chaotic competition between Stewie and his new rival, Doug. Doug, this prodigy baby who can do no wrong, immediately steals the spotlight, much to Stewie's chagrin. Stewie, ever the drama queen, is ready to defend his honor, and honestly, his entire existence, against this new threat. The whole premise of Doug being a superior toddler is inherently funny because, well, they're babies. The show loves to take these mundane situations and turn them into epic, often ridiculous battles of ego. This episode delves into the idea of one-upmanship, not just between Stewie and Doug, but also between Peter and Lois, and even the show itself trying to one-up previous seasons. It's a meta-commentary wrapped in a baby rivalry. The writing feels a bit scattered at times, like they had a few good ideas and just stitched them together. The 80s nostalgia storyline, while funny in concept, feels a bit like a tacked-on subplot that Peter constantly injects himself into. It clashes with the main Stewie-Doug rivalry, and while Peter's characters often derail things, this felt particularly jarring. Visually, it's standard Family Guy. There are moments of visual gags, like the sheer absurdity of the jungle gym or Peter's various decade-themed costumes, but nothing groundbreaking. The pacing is a little uneven. The Stewie storyline feels like it has more momentum, while Peter's escapades feel more like interruptions. Overall, it's a decent episode, but not a standout. It's the kind of episode you watch, chuckle at a few jokes, and then forget about it. It doesn't push any boundaries or offer any profound insights, but it does provide some classic Family Guy absurdity. My initial verdict? It's a solid 6.8 out of 10. It's got its moments, but it ultimately feels a bit unfocused. It's for the diehard fans who will appreciate any new Stewie or Peter shenanigans, but it's probably not going to convert anyone new. What would have pushed it higher? A tighter integration between the Peter and Stewie plots, and maybe a stronger thematic through line. Let's talk about that opening sequence. The daycare class is just a backdrop for the immediate rivalry between Stewie and Doug. Doug shows up, and it's like this sudden explosion of talent. He's tumbling, he's amazing, and Stewie is instantly threatened. Stewie's reaction, wanting to give Doug his clothes and basically declare him his son, is so over the top. It's a classic Stewie move, trying to assert dominance in the most bizarre way possible. The writers are really playing up this idea of Stewie's insecurity and his desperate need to be the best. And it's funny because it's so relatable, even if we're talking about a baby. The 80s movie marathon Peter subjects Chris to is another standout moment. The idea of recommending VHS tapes in this day and age is hilarious. And Peter's advice, telling Chris to just do what the 28-year-old teenagers do, is peak Peter. It's irresponsible, absurd, and perfectly captures his character. It's a great setup for the problems Chris might encounter later, but more importantly, it's just a funny bet on its own. The writers know that Peter's terrible advice is a goldmine for comedy, and they exploit it here. It's not just about the 80s, it's about Peter's fundamental inability to parent effectively, forcing Chris to learn about relationships through a warped, outdated lens. Then there's the show and tell segment. Stewie's seashell is hilariously inappropriate, and Peter's reaction is priceless. He's more concerned about his own use of the seashell than Stewie's presentation. It's a classic Family Guy gag where the parents are more messed up than the kids. Doug's show and tell is equally ridiculous, with his PG movie ticket stub and his story about Moana and CBD oil. The Moana detail is a particularly clever jab at modern anxieties and celebrity culture, framed through the lens of a children's character. It's the kind of pop culture commentary that makes this show work. The writers are satirizing our obsession with wellness and mental health by applying it to a fictional character in the most unexpected way. And the Lion Bar? A simple British candy that triggers Stewie into a full-blown existential crisis about being one-upped. It's the perfect escalation of their rivalry. The gym class scene where the frisbee gets stuck is another prime example of the show's ability to create high-stakes scenarios out of nothing. The jungle gym is presented as this ancient death trap contraption. The description of it being from the 1930s and children's lives being expendable is grimly funny. Stewie's determination to climb it and his ridiculous backup plan involving Spider-Man, who turns out to be Peter, is pure Stewie. It's his ego and his competitive spirit driving him into a dangerous situation. The writers are using this to highlight Stewie's ambition and his tendency to exaggerate the importance of everything he does. He sees himself as a hero, and this is his epic quest. The scene where Lois confronts Peter about his 80s obsession is a crucial turning point. She's fed up, and her frustration feels genuine. Her argument that 80s nostalgia is tired and worn out and borderline dangerous is a good meta-commentary on the show itself. It's like Lois is speaking for the audience who might be tired of Peter's recurring gags. Peter's response, though, is classic Peter. He doubles down, decides to drill a hole in the wall to watch girls shower, and then proceeds to kill a gopher. It's a perfect example of how Peter takes a valid criticism and completely misinterprets it, leading to even more destructive behavior. The writers are showing that Peter is completely resistant to change and progress, and his 80s phase is a manifestation of that stubbornness. He's not just nostalgic, he's actively harmful in his refusal to let go. The gopher death is darkly funny and underscores the collateral damage of Peter's actions. The scene where Stewie is stuck on the jungle gym with Doug is pure chaos.
The storm, the wind, the groaning metal, and the appearance of the homeless people, it's a perfect storm of absurdity. Stewie's attempt to use his Elmo phone to call for help is hilarious, especially Elmo's unhelpful yet endearing responses. It's the kind of absurd detail that makes Stewie's world so unique.
The writers are leaning into the helplessness of the situation and contrasting it with the childish tools Stewie has at his disposal. It shows Stewie's resourcefulness, but also his immaturity in dealing with genuine danger. The interaction between the faint voices of Doug's friends adds another layer of comedic frustration. It's a perfect representation of communication breakdown and the frustration of being unable to connect when you need it most. The show plays with the idea of perspective and distance, both literal and emotional. Peter's sudden shift to the 1920s, then the 1910s, is classic Peter. He's unable to stick with one obsession, and he's constantly chasing the next shiny thing, often with disastrous results. Lois's final plea for him to be normal is met with his complete misunderstanding, leading to his retreat into his alone time. It's a sad yet funny commentary on his inability to connect with his family or adapt to the present. The writers are highlighting Peter's arrested development and his cyclical nature. He never truly learns or grows, always falling back on his predictable patterns. The final scene, with Peter in yet another costume and the implication that he'll never truly change, is the perfect Family Guy ending. Let's do a character heat check. Stewie in this episode is at his competitive best. He's insecure, he's ambitious, and he's driven by his rivalry with Doug. His desperate attempts to one-up Doug, from his show-and-tell seashell to his heroic and reckless climb of the jungle gym, showcase his complex personality. He's willing to go to extreme lengths to prove his superiority, but underneath it all, there's a vulnerability that makes him a compelling character. He's not just a mad genius. He's a baby with a massive ego and a lot of insecurity. His moments on the jungle gym, his fear, and his desperate calls for help, while still laced with humor, show a more desperate side than we often see. Brian, on the other hand, is mostly a bystander, offering commentary and the occasional sarcastic remark. He's the voice of reason that Peter and Stewie rarely listen to. He's not actively involved in the main plots, but his presence grounds the absurdity slightly. He's the cool uncle who watches the chaos unfold and occasionally offers a dry observation. He's used more as a foil for the other character's irrationality than as a character with his own arc in this episode. Peter, as usual, is the driving force of chaos. His 80s obsession, his terrible parenting advice to Chris, his problematic shower-watching scheme, and his subsequent decade hopping are all classic Peter. He's completely oblivious to the consequences of his actions and utterly resistant to change. He embodies the show's satire of nostalgia and arrested development. His performance here is peak Peter, infuriating, hilarious, and consistently self-destructive. Lois is the voice of reason and the long-suffering wife. She's the one trying to keep the family grounded and call out Peter's nonsense. Her frustration with Peter's 80s obsession reaches a boiling point, and she finally puts her foot down. She's the moral compass of the episode, and while Peter constantly tries to derail her efforts, her reactions are what allow the audience to connect with the absurdity. She's the audience surrogate, experiencing the same exasperation we do. Chris is largely relegated to being the recipient of Peter's terrible advice. He's the earnest kid trying to navigate the confusing world of girls and dating, only to be fed outdated and harmful information. He's a sympathetic character, and his willingness to try Peter's advice, even when it's clearly flawed, makes you root for him. He's a good representation of someone who is trying to learn and grow, but is constantly hampered by his environment. Meg, as usual, is mostly absent or gets a throwaway line that highlights her marginalized status within the family. She's the punchline character, and while that's a tired trope, it's consistent with her role. She doesn't have a significant plot or character arc here, which is unfortunately typical. However, her presence, even in a minor capacity, serves to highlight the dysfunction of the rest of the family. The other babies, like Doug and the various classmates, serve as plot devices to drive Stewie's rivalry and showcase his insecurities. They're not deeply developed characters, but they serve their purpose in the narrative. The homeless people on the playground are a particularly dark and bizarre addition, serving as a grim reminder of the harsh realities that exist even within the show's exaggerated world. Their presence adds an uncomfortable layer to the chaotic climax. Okay, let's dive into some of the hidden gems. First up, the Tenet reference. When they cut to Chris asking Peter about girls, the announcer says, "We now return to Christopher Nolan's Tenet. I'm already completely lost." This is a brilliant little meta joke.
Tenet was notoriously confusing, and the show is basically admitting that even they don't understand it, or are using that confusion as a punchline for Chris's dating woes.
It's a quick jab at a recent culturally relevant film that most people found baffling. Next, the VHS tapes. Peter's handing over 16 candles, Can't Buy Me Love, and Say Anything on VHS. The joke isn't just that they're old, it's that VHS itself is a forgotten technology. When Chris asks what those letters stand for, Peter's response, "That information has been lost to history," is a perfect encapsulation of how quickly technology becomes obsolete. It's a subtle nod to the passage of time and how much we take modern convenience for granted. Then there's Moana's agoraphobia and CBD oil. This is a sharp piece of satire. Moana, a beloved Disney character, is suddenly dealing with modern anxieties, and her solution is a trendy wellness product. The writers are poking fun at our society's obsession with mental health jargon and the quick fixes we seek, applying it to a character who, in her original context, was all about inner strength and exploration. It's unexpected and hilarious. The name Dried Booger Ridge for a part of the jungle gym climb is pure Family Guy absurdity. It's disgusting, juvenile, and exactly the kind of detail that makes their jokes land. It's not a reference to anything specific, but it's a testament to the writer's commitment to gross-out humor and finding the most ridiculous ways to describe mundane things. It makes the already perilous climb even more comically dreadful. And finally, Peter's decade hopping. He starts with the 80s, then jumps to the 1920s for the legal cocaine, and then to the 1910s for silent movies. This isn't just random, it's a commentary on how society cycles through nostalgic phases. He's desperately trying to find the best decade, but he's always doing it in the most problematic or self-serving way possible. It highlights the superficiality of chasing trends and the unhealthy obsession with the past. It's a running gag that encapsulates Peter's arrested development and his inability to live in the present. Let's play a game of what if for this episode. First, what if Peter's 80s obsession led to a genuinely positive lesson? Instead of drilling holes and killing gophers, imagine if he actually tried to engage with 80s culture in a way that, say, taught Chris about genuine connection or how to deal with rejection in a healthy way, maybe by watching The Breakfast Club and discussing the character's struggles. Lois could have initiated it, seeing Peter's misguided enthusiasm and steering it towards something productive. Peter, being Peter, would have probably still messed it up, but the attempt would have been a nice change. It would have shown a tiny glimmer of growth. Second, what if Stewie's jungle gym climb had a different outcome? Instead of Doug falling and Stewie getting stuck with him, imagine if Stewie, in his race to the top, actually encountered a real danger, like a structural weakness in the jungle gym that he had to warn Doug about. This could have led to a moment of genuine heroism, where Stewie, for once, prioritized Doug's safety over his own ego. It would have been a massive character development moment for Stewie, showing that he can be brave and selfless when it truly matters, not just competitively. It would have given the rivalry a more complex and perhaps heartwarming conclusion. Finally, let's consider the show and tell segment. Instead of Doug's elaborate stories, what if Stewie's shell presentation actually caused a minor scandal? Imagine if it led to the daycare teacher getting fired, or Peter getting called into the principal's office for encouraging inappropriate behavior. This would have escalated the stakes of Stewie's rebellion and given Peter a more direct consequence for his own questionable influence, tying the plots together more effectively than just a one-off gag. It would have provided a more satisfying narrative payoff for Stewie's initial act of defiance. So, the verdict on Family Guy Season 20, Episode 4. I'm giving this episode a 6.9 out of 10. It's not bad, but it's definitely not a home run. The score is that high because of Stewie's relentless competitive drive and the sheer absurdity of the jungle gym climax. The low score comes from the disjointedness between the Peter 80s plot and the Stewie rivalry. It feels like two separate episodes crammed together. The episode is really for the longtime fans who enjoy the show's established characters and its brand of humor, particularly Stewie's complex personality and Peter's unhinged behavior. New viewers might be a bit lost or find the plots too random. What would have pushed this score higher? A tighter integration of the two main storylines. If Peter's 80s obsession had somehow directly influenced Stewie's rivalry, or vice versa, it would have felt more cohesive. Or if Lois's confrontation with Peter had led to a more significant, albeit temporary, change in his behavior, it would have provided a stronger emotional arc.
Ultimately, this episode is a prime example of Family Guy's fluctuating quality.
It has moments of brilliance, but they're often surrounded by filler or tangential plots. It's a show that thrives on nostalgia, whether it's Peter's 80s fixation or the show's own callbacks. But sometimes that reliance can make it feel a little stuck in the past, much like Peter himself. And that's a wrap on this dive into Family Guy's chaotic world. Just like Peter can't escape the 80s, we're always here, dissecting these episodes, one ridiculous plot at a time.